everyone, this is Addicon Podfic, back with another podfic. Today I will be reading The Coral Palace, but I did it for the lull. This will be Chapter 10, A Painting Ruins Our Night. Let's get right into it. 3 days and nights had passed peacefully since the meeting on the summer solstice, and one morning Percy was pulled from his slumber by knocking on his cabin door. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes and yawning. "Who is it?" he called sleepily, glancing towards his door. A voice laughed lightly at him. "Nobody," Annabeth's voice said back, leaving Percy snickering at the reminder of Annabeth's claim on Polyphemus' island. While overall the experience wouldn't be one he would recommend, time had blunted the situation they had been through, and certain things were even funnier now than they had been at the moment. "Well, nobody can let themselves in while I get dressed," he replied teasingly. Annabeth opened the door while he moved towards his bathroom with a camp shirt and shorts. Annabeth was dressed similarly in her camp shirt, but had on a pair of black leggings instead of shorts. "Hurry up so we can make it to breakfast on time, seaweed brain," Annabeth teased back, looking over at him happily. He grinned at her and closed the bathroom door, swiftly readying himself for the day. Thankfully, the past few days had come and gone without much fuss. The campers ensuring camp was ready for any possible siege that could come their way. Xanth and Kim had been slow to respond to his texts, but thankfully both seemed to be holding their own well against the onslaught of battle set before them. Oddly enough, the previous day Kim had also started to sound more exhausted, similar to how Xanth had been. She seemed slightly scatterbrained, and the goddess of sea storms had actually called Piper Penelope on accident, despite having met her before. Triton had apparently been kept busy with Benson's the Chyme at Atlantis. The main fight seemingly shifted towards the capital for the time being. No more dreams or new evidence had come to light in recent days, and the identity of the true enemy had not yet been discovered. Percy wondered if his sisters were fighting more than they were willing to admit to him and had exhausted themselves too far. He had no evidence to suggest that, however, as even his father had reassured him that they were in good contact with both of his older sisters, despite them being unable to check in on them in person. He made a mental note to bring it up to Rhodes later in the afternoon. His eldest immortal sister would be arriving for another meeting due to the fact that the Ares warriors would be arriving later in the afternoon to begin setting up defenses. Rhodes wanted to ensure that they had built up their defenses and ensure they had enough supplies for anything they would need to do so. Soon enough, he finished brushing his teeth, grabbing Annabeth's hand and walking with her towards breakfast. He filled Annabeth in on his text to his sister the previous night. Annabeth frowned softly as he brought up his concerns. "We'll be sure to mention it to Rhodes this afternoon at the meeting," the daughter of Athena noted, looking over towards Chiron instinctively. "Mention what to Rhodes?" Thalia's voice called from behind them. Annabeth quickly summarized Percy's text with Xanth and Kim from the past few days. Thalia shook her head at her younger cousin. "The relationship you have with them is so much different than my minor god siblings. I feel like they're always just looking for a fight with me and Jason," Thalia said, annoyance entering her voice and caused her eyes to flash slightly with lightning. Percy grinned at her. "Xanth said she'll treat you like honorary siblings if you'd like. Rhodes would probably be down too if you're all right with a full closet makeover," Percy teased back. Thalia's expression lightened, but she frowned at him. "Nuh-uh, tell them to keep their kelp heads away from my stuff," Thalia laughed. Percy snickered at her. Annabeth rolled her eyes and kept walking towards the pavilion as the cousins caught up. Breakfast was somewhat tense as the younger campers had run with their conversation from Olympus and told all their younger siblings about the battle going on in the seas. Chiron stood after a while, stomping his foot to silence the campers. He rose. I know you have all likely heard what we discussed a few nights ago in Olympus. I wanted to reassure you that as of right now, there is no threat to camp and everything we are doing is just a precaution. Your cabin counselors will be getting more information to give you this afternoon on what to expect. And Zeus has sent support by both allowing the hunters to stay here for the foreseeable future and supplying extra support with a batch of immortal warriors belonging to Ares," Chiron announced, looking over the crowd. The hunters did not seem keen on this arrangement, but said nothing as Thalia looked at them intensely. Clarice at the Ares cabin table frowned again, looking annoyed about something. "In regards to safety, please do not venture off into the woods alone. If you are going beyond camp boundaries, we ask that you please let the big house know where you are going and how long to expect you to be gone. If you need your weapons repaired, the Hephaestus cabin has agreed to do so and will get you sorted out. Please see them with any questions. Other than that, keep an eye on each other. Together, we will work to ensure this conflict never sees the inside of our camp," Chiron reassured, looking over all the demigods settled before him. Older campers soothed younger, and after his statement concluded, the centaur sat back into his seat. Mr. D scowled at his goblet before him, flicking his wrist and changing the orange juice into a red wine. Chiron stared at him before sighing as Mr. D took a pointed gulp from the glass. Soon enough, campers disappeared to their morning activities, still whispering to each other about what they had learned. Percy guided his first two sword-fighting lessons of the day with the younger campers. By the time both were said and done, the sun had risen high into the sky, and Percy quickly cleaned up before heading off to lunch. As he settled down at the table with Annabeth, he pulled out his phone and sent a message to Kim and Xanth, asking how they were faring that day. A few minutes passed with no reply, and he frowned before standing and moving towards the bronze fire pit near the head table. Lunch was club sandwiches, and Percy sent off an offering to both his older sisters and father with a handful of chips that had appeared on the table. He felt his father brush his hair with a gentle breeze, but did not smell the familiar scent of lemons or humid air he had come to expect from Xanth or Kim. He frowned, tension building slightly in his stomach. Right as he was contemplating reaching out to ask his father how Xanth and Kim Apulia were doing, his phone buzzed, and he quickly inspected the text message there. Kim had replied, informing Percy that Xanth was resting after a few skirmishes the night before, and letting him know she too would be off to rest shortly. The battles around the Coral Palace and Kim's own palace in the tropics had slowed somewhat after a small spike during the night, and they both had taken the opportunity to relax somewhat before more inevitably arrived. It soothed Percy somewhat, however he still had a tense feeling in his gut that something wasn't quite right. He shook his head. He would speak with Rode later, who would be able to check in on both of his older sisters. Shortly after lunch, all the head counselors made their way to the big house, Hazel, Frank, Jason, and Rachel tagging along with them. As they entered the rec room, Percy spotted Rode sitting next to Chiron at the end of the ping-pong table. They moved towards her quickly as everyone took their place, and she smiled at him. "Hello, Percy. How are you feeling today?" Rode asked softly. Percy smiled weakly at her before remembering his concerns. Chiron noticed the expression on his face and turned his attention towards the demigod son of the seas as Rode's face turned to one of concern. "I'm a little anxious and can't entirely place why," Percy admitted as he sat down, Annabeth sitting directly across from them. Rode frowned. "Everything is going well under the seas. Our siblings are holding their ground well. Xanth and Kim are resting today while they recover from skirmishes the past few hours. Messengers arrived this morning with updates from both of them," Rode informed him. Brows furrowed. Percy frowned. "I just can't shake the feeling that something is off about that," Percy admitted. Chiron looked at him appraisingly. "What makes you say that, Percy?" Jason asked, and suddenly Percy realized that all the demigods were staring at him. Percy winced. "I'm not sure. Xanth and Kim just sound more tired than they should be for what they're saying is going on," he tried to explain. The others exchanged concerned glances. Rode placed a hand on his shoulder. Both of them had sent messages today, ensuring that all is fine in their homes, and have continued to do so this afternoon. They have a schedule for sending messages, and so far they have not missed any check-ins. At the moment, no issues have arisen on that front. Today, I'd love to go over the preparations for the fortification here. Father informed me that Ares will be providing reinforcements to you all," Rode asked, looking over at Chiron, who nodded. "Yes, Lord Ares is sending a squad of immortal warriors to camp. They will assist in patrolling and guarding the perimeter," Chiron said. "We should probably check them for flamethrowers first," Connor called teasingly from the other side of the table. Percy and the others laughed at the reminder of how the party had turned out near the end of the night. They had promised to be on their best behavior, according to Lord Zeus. Chiron said with amusement. "I will supply emergency charms to camp. If anything breaks past the fences, give them out to all the campers. They can bring you all straight to Rhodes for safety," Rode informed them, the other campers nodding in satisfaction at that plan. It was reassuring to have an escape route in place for the younger campers who couldn't fight well and that they wanted out of danger. Leo spoke for the Festus cabin next, letting everyone know how weapon stores were becoming more filled, and mentioning to Chiron they could use another shipment of celestial bronze to help create replacement parts for the automatons guarding the camp boundaries. Rhodes spoke up, offering to send a shipment left over from the Cyclops forges later in the week. The others each followed, finally concluding demigod business for the meeting as no one had any questions. Rhodes swiftly bid Percy goodbye, promising to head to Atlantis later in the day to check in on the rest of their family. Despite the uneasy feeling only growing stronger, Percy heard the sound of a war horn blasting near the edge of camp and knew that was something he would have to deal with. He walked to the crest of the hill, looking down and spotting a group of warriors dressed in full battle regalia, tramping through the trees. Many were dressed in Greek armor, clutching celestial bronze weapons in their hands, while others looked like mortal soldiers straight out of a history novel. Percy saw a familiar face marching near the front. Dressed fully in celestial bronze armor, with a spear strapped across her back, Loginia and the immortal warriors had arrived. The demigod son of Poseidon set his uneasy feeling on the back burner. It would have to be something he dealt with later. For now, he had to make sure no flamethrowers had been smuggled across the camp boundaries. A few hours later, Percy sat by the water, face turned towards the lapping waves on shore. He was still tense, but not sure why. The water was calm and peaceful today. If anything had happened to his godly siblings, the sea would have been churning with white-hot rage as his father's wrath split open the waters. He wondered briefly if it was simply the sensation of the impending battle he felt like was coming his way. He was contemplating heading to Atlantis to check in personally, just to make sure that he was overreacting and something hadn't changed underwater. Rode had agreed to go to Atlantis, and none of his Atlantean family had given any indication that something was wrong, and yet his uneasy feeling had only gotten stronger through the day. Annabeth found him there, sitting down next to him with a quiet thump as her leg hit the sand. He smiled at her, leaning into her shoulder. She lay her head on top of his, sitting in silence for a moment. "You're worried about your siblings," Annabeth stated after a moment, pulling away slightly to look at him. He nodded, returning his gaze towards the water. "I know they're immortal, but that voice, it felt hateful and cruel in ways we've only seen a few times before," Percy sighed. Annabeth nodded. "It's normal to be worried, Percy. I'm worried too, but this time I feel like we're actually being taken seriously by everyone," Annabeth said. Percy nodded his agreement. "It is nice to actually have backup for once, even though I cannot imagine what Xanth will say when she finds out I'll be seeing her ex more than her the next 2 weeks at least," Percy said, laughing slightly. Eugenia had arrived earlier in the afternoon with a squadron of 40 or so immortal warriors of Ares. Many of them were Ares' children, his domain allowing him the ability to grant minor immortality to his favorite soldiers across the ages to fight in battle for eternity. Some of them, however, were just famous mortal soldiers gifted in combat by Ares to continue fighting long after when they were originally fated to die. They had set up camp in the woods, already seeking out their younger siblings to spar and start brawls with. Percy actually pitied Clarice. Apparently Eugenia had taken a special interest in the older demigod. "It is nice," Annabeth replied, amusement in her voice. "And Xanth will probably curse up a storm, that's for sure." She finished, laughing slightly. Percy grinned back at her, glancing back towards camp, and spotted a few of their friends walking along with Rachel, who was chatting with them excitedly. Leo, Piper, Hazel, Frank, and Jason were following the oracle, laughing at something she had said. Spotting the two of them down by the shore, they waved, Percy waving back as they gestured for him to join them. He and Emma stood, making their way towards the group before them. "What's going on?" Percy asked amusedly as he approached. Rachel grinned as Piper spoke up. "Rachel just told us she finally finished this infamous painting she's been talking about all week." Piper laughed, Rachel blushing slightly. "And we're finally off to see it," Jason finished. Rachel nodded in agreement at the words. "It's true. Do you want to come with? It's still drying, but other than that, it's completed, finally," Rachel added, looking slightly embarrassed by the comments about her work. "I still don't know what it's even about," Leo whined, rolling his eyes teasingly. Rachel snickered at him. "Well, you're going to see it in like 5 minutes, so hold your horses," Rachel said in response, turning and marching away towards her cave. Apollo had helped her fashion the previous few years. Percy and Annabeth shrugged, joining the small procession towards the Oracle of Delphi's newest creation. Percy forced himself to relax slightly. He would worry about talking with Rode and checking in on his older sisters in the morning. Tonight, everything was looking up. He had his friends, reinforcements had arrived, camp was secure, and all was well. And yet, Percy could not shake the feeling that something was coming. It was dark now, as they made their way across camp, talking about the day's events and other topics as they walked. The sunset in the distance had finally fallen under the horizon as they entered Rachel's cave rooms, the oracle quickly flipping on the lamps, swinging overhead. Percy had to hand it to Apollo for the design. When he first entered, it looked like a cave, down to a small hallway lit by lamps designed to look like glowing purple torches. Upon reaching the end of the hallway, it opened up into a large room. 2 skylights sat above, at the moment, giving a limited view of the stars you could see in the New York sky. The walls were smooth and painted lavender, covered in various artwork from different times of Rachel's life. There was also a photo wall that Rachel had started after the Titan War, photos of camp and their friends through various summers. Percy noticing with a pleased expression that there were a few photos of her time in NYU campus this past year with a small group of mortal friends she had made. A large black couch sat facing a massive flat-screen TV on the left wall, and the right wall had 2 doors. One led to a bathroom and the other Rachel's bedroom and painting studio. "Where is it? Come on, I gotta see what you've been talking about for a week," Leo said eagerly, flopping down on the sofa and turning to face Rachel. The redhead laughed and headed into her room, letting them all know to sit down. "I bet it's about pollution," Percy started as they all settled in. Jason's eyes gleamed. "You're on. I bet it's about a human rights prompt," Jason shot back. Percy grinned as they shook hands. Piper snorted and shook her head. "I say," Leo started, looking thoughtful. A mischievous expression fell over his face as he grinned teasingly at his friends, waving his hands mysteriously at them. "It's been a prophecy all along," he said slyly. Everyone groaned, throwing pillows on him as he laughed. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's beautiful, Hazel remarked, turning her gaze from another painting Rachel had hanging up of a flawlessly painted silver bow teetering on the edge of a cliff, strings snapped and broken. Percy wasn't sure what the painting was about, but it was very well done. All right, everyone close your eyes while I set it up on the stool, Rachel called with a laugh, everyone making a show of covering their eyes as she moved the painting and stool in front of them. Finally, after a moment of shuffling and teasing remarks, Rachel settled and finally spoke. I'm calling this The Capture of Divinity, and it's for my school project. We were supposed to paint something about the concept of power imbalance, Rachel announced, allowing them to open their eyes. The demigods were completely silent as they lay eyes on the painting, eyes shooting towards Percy as everyone registered what was on the canvas. The silence was broken by Leo stuttering in a stunned tone. Do I have the gift of prophecy? Because what the fuck? The painting at first glance was very dark, toned in coloration. A lot of dark black and gray elements had been used to create a monstrous shadowed figure standing over the top of the painting with glowing silver eyes, shadowed arms reaching towards the front of the painting. A female figure was centered on the canvas. It was the image of a woman being dragged to her knees by silver chains painted with the appearance that they were glowing, seemingly wrapped in the same shadows as the monster above her. She was dressed in a simple white tunic that was stained with golden ichor down the sides. The chains were wrapped around her upper arms, down to her wrists, seemingly cutting into her skin and causing rivulets of gold ichor to spill to the ground in small pools around her legs. Her head was facing upward, neck outstretched, and eyes glowing a solid, brilliant gold as her body language gave the impression of pulling against the chains holding her. Tears of golden ichor ran down her face, her expression twisted into one of complete desperation. Familiar golden hair framed her face, and a crown was being ripped from her head by the monster's clawed fingers. Dwarfed by the creature's hands, and looking smaller than Percy knew that crown would be. Without a doubt, this was Xanth, painted before him. Percy's entire body tensed. He glanced over at Annabeth with alarm, Rachel looking at all of them with confusion written over her face. What's wrong? You guys don't like it? She asked quickly, looking back towards her work. Percy couldn't speak for the moment, panic rushing through his mind. Rachel, you've met Xanth, right? Annabeth asked quickly. Rachel shook her head. No, I haven't actually. I got lost after finding the art gallery and made it back late for the party the other night. Then I got tired, so I went to bed super early. Why? The oracle asked sharply. Percy took a deep breath before regaining his words. Because you just painted her, Percy said slowly, looking at Rachel with horror in his eyes. Rachel's mouth dropped open, eyes widening in shock as she turned with a new expression towards the painting she had just unveiled. I'll go get Chiron. He needs to see this. Probably Eugenia, too, Frank said quickly, standing as Hazel did as well. I'll go with him, the daughter of Pluto said. The two of them ran out to find the immortal trainer of heroes. I don't understand. I didn't see this in my sleep. I didn't feel compelled to paint this. Why would I paint this? Rachel asked quickly, eyes wide now with concern. I'm not sure, but we should probably contact Apollo. He can take a look at it and determine if this is old or something yet to come. Annabeth said, still looking at Percy. The demigod of the sea nodded slightly, forgetting he had told Annabeth about his and Xanth's discussion about the time the goddess had been bound before. Wait, this has happened to her before? Leo asked suddenly, looking back and forth between them. Percy nodded. A long time ago, she was bound. Apparently there are certain immortals that use monsters to hunt minor gods and demigods for money. Percy growled in response. Piper gasped. That's terrible. But in possible good news, that could mean that this is a glimpse of the past, not her future, right? Piper mused, looking over at Rachel, who shrugged. I honestly don't know. This was one of those paintings I thought had no godly forces behind it. I'm not sure if I painted anything else important that could be helpful to you guys, Rachel said worriedly, glancing around. Something dawned on Annabeth, then her eyes flashing as she looked at Rachel intently. Rachel, you said you changed something in this painting because you felt like you had to. What did you change? The daughter of Athena asked, the oracle turning to look back at the portrait, pointing towards Xanth's head. Her hair color was black before, and a few things on her face looked different. Rachel replied, looking back towards them. Percy frowned at that, looking over at Annabeth, whose face was set with contemplation. Why would it show you her with black hair before? It's one of her more defining features. Annabeth asked quietly, more to herself than anything, but Rachel shrugged anyway in response. Percy didn't know the answer either, but pulled out his phone, suddenly remembering he had it. He sent a text to Kim and Xanth first, before swiping to his contacts and hitting the call button under Xanth's contact. The phone rang twice before a generic voicemail echoed out. Percy tried once more, and then tried Kim Apulia and got the same answer. He almost shouted in frustration when the voicemail message played again, but suddenly spotted two familiar faces making their way back into the cave with Chiron tucking behind them. There, that's it, Hazel said, pointing towards the painting. Chiron frowned as he approached it. Percy growled again as once more he was set to voicemail. Both his texts and calls went unanswered. Percy closed his eyes and reached out to Xanth and Kim with his mind, feeling nothing where normally he would find his sister's presence. He reached out for his father and Triton, then Ben, and even Amphitrite went without a response. The alarms in his head got even louder, shaking his head at Annabeth, who was watching him curiously. I can't get a hold of Xanth or Kim, Percy said darkly. Chiron nodded worriedly. I tried to contact Lord Poseidon before coming down here. Iris states she is unable to connect the call. I suspect the rest of the royal family is much the same. This timing does not feel unconnected, Chiron said gravely. Percy's heart thudded in his chest as Annabeth squeezed his hand. The demigod son of the sea swallowed hard. No Iris messaging or mental communication. What in the world was going on underwater? Had Atlantis fallen? Could this be an all-out attack? Annabeth asked darkly. Chiron frowned harder, looking back at the painting. At this point, it seems likely. We must send word to Olympus just in case. Our reinforcements arrive just in time, it may seem. The immortal centaur said. Percy shook his head. So there's probably no chance this is depicting when Xanth was younger then, he asked. Chiron winced. Unlikely at best. I do not know much about her previous plight, but I did know she was ensnared by mortals and a few monsters. This appears to be a more powerful entity in play, Chiron determined, his tail flicking anxiously. I need to go to Atlantis, Percy said immediately. The others are already moving to protest. Look, I have the conch shell Triton gave to me. It takes me straight to the palace out of danger. I'll see why Dad isn't responding, and he can go check on the others. Maybe this is still in the future. Maybe it hasn't happened yet, he finished, also trying to reassure himself. That's too dangerous, Annabeth cut in, looking at him sharply. I don't think you should go alone. What if something happens? She asked him more quietly, grabbing his hand. Percy shook his head and squeezed her hand back. It's the safest for me underwater near Dad and Triton, and Amphitrite doesn't let anything near the palace. Look, if I'm not back in a few hours, then let Olympus know I'm missing, but I'll send word as soon as I've gotten a hold of Dad and my sisters, Percy said, starting to stand. The others weakly protested, but they knew it was currently their best plan. I can't say I fully agree with this, but it is important to determine if this is a changeable event, Chiron finally said, looking grave. But be careful, Percy. Camp will need you if the fighting reaches shore. Percy nodded at the reminder, starting to move out of Rachel's cave with Annabeth in tow. The daughter of Athena raced after him, muttering plans to herself and to Percy as she moved with determination towards the Hades cabin. Contact Apollo, that's our next step. Check on camp fortifications and figure out how to contact Rode. We could send a messenger with one of her necklaces. Surely those can break through whatever's going on. That's if she's even there. She was heading to Atlantis earlier to check in with Dad and Triton about Xanth and Kim, Percy said darkly. Annabeth frowned, looking up as they approached the doors to cabin 13. Nico! Percy called sharply, knocking on the doors of the Hades cabin. He heard a shuffling sound, and then his younger cousin's voice replied. Come in. What's wrong? Nico said as Percy entered the cabin, noticing how flushed both their expressions were. Long story short, Rachel painted Xanth getting captured, and no one can get a hold of anyone in my godly family. I'm going to Atlantis to see if I can figure out what's going wrong. Camp could be under attack, but we don't know, and we need you to tell me how many lives the ocean has taken today. Percy spat out quickly, Nico's eyes widening with every part of the past half-hour's events being revealed to him. What the fuck? Nico stuttered out, eyes wild. He shook his head, closing his eyes suddenly and concentrating. He tilted his head slightly after a moment of tense silence. Not too many near the core palace, if that's what you want to know. One drowning off the coast, but no violent storms or anything like that. The son of Hades finally said, opening his eyes again and looking between Percy and Annabeth quickly. It could mean we still have time. I have to get to Atlantis, Percy said, turning and moving out of the cabin. Nico and Annabeth ran after him, protesting. You have no idea what you could be walking into, Nico argued, looking at Annabeth. I think we should give it some time. Try and contact them again, Annabeth said, grabbing Percy's hand and pulling him to a stop a few feet away from the Poseidon cabin. Percy sighed, stepping closer to Annabeth and placing a hand on the back of her neck. He pushed his forehead against hers, and she swallowed anxiously, looking up at him with worry written across her face. It's the best option you have. You know time is of the essence here. We need to make sure everyone knows what could be coming, Percy replied softly, Nico looking away awkwardly, looking like he almost wanted to run away from the situation. I know it is. I just don't like it, Annabeth conceded, leaning back slightly to look at him again. If we had a better plan, I'd take it, Percy said, slightly amused. Annabeth sighed at him, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Percy smiled at her, gripping her hand tightly. I know, but if you don't come home to me, I'll kill you, Seaweed Brain, his girlfriend said, not able to fully shake the worry from her voice. Percy grinned at her cheekily. I know better than to think you won't judo flip Charon, Percy teased back, Annabeth letting out a weak laugh at the joke. Nico snorted. Please don't. Dad wouldn't shut up about it for weeks because Karen would use it as an excuse to ask for another pay raise, the Ghost King said weakly. Percy laughed at that, Annabeth shaking her head. I need to get going. You guys get camp ready just in case. I'll IM you in a few hours, Percy said after another moment, finally letting go of Annabeth's hand to move towards his cabin. The other two nodded at him, Annabeth looking tense again. I'll hold you to it, she said firmly. Without further discussion, Percy moved inside his cabin and grabbed the conch shell from its place on the shelf next to his bed. He stared at it before checking to make sure he had riptide in his pocket and high-tide around his neck. Hesitating for a moment, he moved over to the drawer of his nightstand, opening it and pulling out a small bag of ambrosia, just in case, and stuffed it into his shorts pocket. After taking a deep breath, he lifted the shell to his lips, blowing through it and listening as it billowed softly through his cabin. Immediately, he smelled salt water and felt himself pulled away as though he was being caught in a current. Hopefully soon he would get to the bottom of all this and ensure his family was safe. Annabeth heard the call of the conch shell blow through Percy's cabin and smelled a salt-water-hinted breeze blow past her as she walked away from cabin 3. She couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. However, she knew that was likely due to how quickly things were moving. She and Nico swiftly made their way across camp. I'm going to go grab Will and let him know what's going on. We'll get the other head counselors out to the big house to fill everyone in, Nico said quickly, Annabeth nodding as he disappeared into the shadows next to him. She hurriedly made her way back towards Rachel's cave and spotted the others walking out, Rachel carrying a canvas covered in a white sheet. Percy's gone, headed to Atlantis. If we don't hear from him in a few hours, we need to alert Olympus that he's missing, Annabeth informed them quickly. Nico's getting the head counselors of the big house with Will. Good. I'll meet you all there after I inform Eugenia of the ongoing events. She'll need to be updated with the rest of the group, Chiron said, nodding sagely. He turned and galloped off towards the woods where the Ares warriors had set up tents and cots in the trees. I swear I had no idea, you guys, Rachel said worriedly, looking truly saddened. Annabeth shook her head. It's not your fault. The Oracle sometimes speaks without you even realizing it. That can't be helped, Annabeth soothed, but it did little to cheer the Oracle's spirits. Percy didn't explain before he left. Xanth was bound before. Why, and how? What's powerful enough to bind a goddess? Piper asked Annabeth. She winced slightly, not sure how to explain the story. It's complicated. I think it's something I should explain in a few minutes, once we get the other counselors updated, she said. The others nodded, agreeing it made sense to update everyone at once and continue on their way to the big house. Other demigods made their way towards the house as well, asking Annabeth what was going on, to which he told them all would be explained once they were all gathered together. She watched as everyone filed into place, Chiron striding in last with Eugenia following closely behind. Unlike the mirth she had seen Eugenia display earlier when speaking with Clarice, the immortal now looked stoic. She was dressed in a black tank top and leather jacket, black jeans and black combat boots. A spear was strapped along her back, and two leather holsters held curved blades celestial bronze daggers on her hips. Annabeth, what's going on? Katie asked from across the ping-pong table, looking worriedly around. Do we need to evacuate the younger campers? The daughter of Demeter asked. The other cabin counselors nodded in agreement, muttering. Annabeth held up her hands, the demigod settling down. Chiron looked for her to take the lead as Eugenia sat down next to him at the table. Sorry to pull everyone away on short notice, but a few things have changed we need to update you all on. Just a bit ago, Rachel went to show us the painting she'd been working on, and we recognized the painting to likely be some sort of prophetic work. Annabeth started, nodding to Rachel, who grimaced and unveiled the painting, propping it up against an empty chair where Percy usually sat. Annabeth swallowed hard as the image came back into view. Eugenia had the most unexpected reaction amidst the soft gasps and wide eyes from the demigods who had yet to see it. She sat up sharply and audibly growled, eyes seeming to flicker with rage and burning flames. She looked at Chiron, who held up a hand in an attempt to calm her. The immortal daughter of Ares stared daggers at the painting as Annabeth moved to continue. As you can see, this likely depicts Xanth. Rachel had never met her and did not understand what she was creating. At the moment, we are having trouble contacting both Xanth and the rest of the royal Atlantean family. Percy had gone to Atlantis to determine if there is trouble there or if something is impeding our ability to get messages through to them, Annabeth said, looking around the table as people glanced at the painting in Percy's chair once more. We don't know when this is set to be occurring. Percy will be back in a few hours, and we will determine more from there. For now, we wanted to keep everyone informed and make sure you all have enough evacuation pendants should they be needed in case of an attack. Annabeth finished calmly, trying to ensure everyone remained with a level head. It It didn't help that her heart was pounding. Something in the back of her mind felt like she was missing something important, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. She shook her head and answered a few questions, making sure to pass extra penance to the Hermes cabin in case camp came under siege. Shortly after she finished speaking, a few of the head counselors started making their way back out of the big house, eventually leaving Thalia, Will, Nico, Chiron, Eugenia, and the rest of the 7 seated around the ping-pong table. You did well settling them. We still don't know if we have cause for worry, Chiron said, nodding to Annabeth. It did little to reassure her at the moment. You still haven't explained how Xanth was bound before, or why, Piper asked quietly, looking at Annabeth knowingly. Annabeth sighed, feeling uncomfortable. Percy, and by default, Xanth, had shared that privately. It felt wrong to discuss something so personal to the family out in the open, but it seemed as though it may come painfully relevant in the near future. She hoped the goddess of tsunamis wouldn't hold sharing this information against her. Annabeth opened her mouth to respond, but a low voice beat her to it. Mortals bound her with magic. She was tortured for years. They stole her flesh, her ichor, her skin, her bones. They took part of her mind in the end. She was never the same after the first time I saw her, back before they first bound her. Eugenia said angrily, voice verging on a growl. That's essentially what she told Percy. Apparently she was discovered hiding in mortal form and hunted by mortals tethered to monsters. She was cut off from the scene, bound with sigils and chains, imbued with magic. Mortal magicians bought her from the hunters to use in their spellcasting, Annabeth said softly, everyone staring at Eugenia in horror. That's awful, Hazel said, disgust heavy in her tone. Hazel was still very adept at magic and had studied more spells in the recent years, now that she had the time. That is dark magic, cruel magic. To take ingredients for a spell unwillingly is for hateful spells that more often than not turn on their own users, the daughter of Pluto elaborated at their curious looks. Eventually it did for them. Xanth broke free. Most of them died in her escape, but a few more powerful pursued her. Her father took care of them after that, Eugenia said firmly, looking darkly pleased. Chiron shifted his legs, looking deeply saddened by the conversation. It was unfortunate, but it was much more common for demigods to be stolen in the old days. Bound abilities also disguise your location from godly beings, so recovering them once they had been taken was nearly impossible, the immortal centaur said softly. So, how would we be able to tell if this was happening to us, or someone around us? Jason asked, looking at the 2 immortal beings in the room. Chiron frowned. Sigils are the most common and the most difficult to break. More powerful wielders can chant incantations. They will need to have you restrained first. You have your abilities until the spell has been completed, so they have to find a way to ensure you can't use them until it's too late. They often used physical bindings. Chains in particular can be inscribed with binding sigils that and are not easy to break once on. I suggest you keep an escape pendant with you at all times. If you feel any inclination that something like that is happening, use it immediately, Chiron warned. The others nodding and grabbing one of the pendants in the box in front of them. Annabeth reached out and picked one up. It was a simple silver shell pendant hanging from a silver chain. She clasped it around her neck alongside the others, ensuring it wouldn't fall off by tugging on it slightly. Rhoda had informed them that they would evacuate anyone who pulled off the necklace and threw it to the ground. For now, I would rest. Eugenia was promised to maintain a patrol for tonight to ensure nothing sneaks past the boundary. If we have not heard from Percy in the morning, I will contact Olympus myself, Chiron reassured them, the others nodding in reply as they clipped the necklaces around their necks. I'm going to reach out to Apollo. He usually replies to me. Maybe he can help figure out if this is a prophecy or just a window into the future, Rachel spoke up suddenly, staring at the image she had painted on the canvas sat before them. Annabeth shook her head in agreement. I still have a hard time understanding how a goddess managed to be bound, Leo piped up, looking between the painting and the others. I mean, Triton told us that Xanth once destroyed an entire city because one of her brothers died there. How could something manage to overpower her? The son of Hephaestus asked incredulously, referring Triton's story the night of the godly party. Eugenia grunted, shaking her head. The royal family is powerful, but not infinite. Olympians are the pillars of power for their domain. The family draws power from them and their aspects. Before Xanth cut herself off from that power in order to hide herself, Poseidon could still watch her, find her even while not in the ocean's waters. When I first saw her, she was fully herself and allowing herself access to the power of her father's kingdom offers her. She was a brand new goddess. Not even 10 years had passed since her ascension, and she had much to learn. She had not yet discovered the connection between the power the waters gave her and her father's ability to find her, even when she was on land. The immortal warrior of Ares said gruffly, scowling. Annabeth nodded slowly. Like an outlet, right? Unplug the machine and it stops working, the daughter of Athena offered, glancing to Chiron, who nodded in agreement. Essentially, yes, but immortals have their own battery pack, if you will. Unplug them from their godly domain, they are still powerful but more easily run down. Connecting back to their domain allows them to recharge, in a sense, allows them to heal themselves and rest. Without it, they become weakened and can be contained. The Olympians, the Olympians are the only exception, as they embody the entire aspect of a domain and are not easily cut off from it. Chiron said sagely, looking back at Annabeth with an approving expression. Well, but this time the royal family is on good terms. Xanth and the others should be at full power, Piper pointed out, glancing over towards Eugenia. The only way the royal family could be bound now is if someone managed to cut them off from their power, isolating them from their father. It would have to be fast. Poseidon would notice quickly if they were forcibly cut off from his domain, or powerful enough to disguise it. Eugenia said slowly, eyes contemplating what she had just announced. Annabeth's mind raced. Surely, then, there would be signs of the sea god's ire by now if something had occurred with his children. What would be able to do that? Jason asked. Magic. Something old, something powerful. And again, it would have to be quick to escape Poseidon's notice. He's monitoring all of his children closely at the moment due to the conflict. Eugenia replied gravely. Would a mortal magician have that ability? Hazel asked thoughtfully. Eugenia shook her head in response, and the room went still as they all digested that information. The silence in the room was heavy for a few moments, the gravity of the situation settling over the demigods like a weighted blanket. Annabeth closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Percy would be fine. Poseidon would have begun tearing the oceans apart if anything had happened to his children. Unless it had escaped his notice, her mind whispered to her. She frowned again, pulling out her phone and checking to see if she had any missed messages. Percy had not texted her, and a tick of anxiety spiked high on her chest. She tried to settle herself, putting her phone back in her pocket and turning to face the rest of the room once again. We may not have answers for a while yet, Chiron said finally, standing up from where he had tucked himself into his wheelchair for the meeting. Go now, and rest while you can. If Percy or anyone else contacts camp while you're sleeping, I will wake you. We can discuss more in the morning, if we have no news. The centaur finished, Eugenia quickly standing and storming out of the big house, practically seething with rage. Annabeth too stood, muttering good night to her mentor and walking out with the rest of the demigods left the room. Jason shook his head as they stepped off the porch, looking out towards where the ocean sat in the distance. I hope Fish Brains gets back to us soon. I just feel like this is the start of something really bad for all of us, Thalia said softly, looking back towards Annabeth meaningfully. I know what you mean, Piper mumbled, glancing down at her feet. Ever since the solstice meeting, I feel like something is creeping closer, the daughter of Aphrodite revealed. Annabeth frowned. I know, I felt it, she said in reply, sighing. Percy has too. We have to trust that he'll be back, Annabeth finished, voice firm. And if he hasn't, we'll go get him back, Nico said darkly, looking determined. Annabeth couldn't help but let out a small smile at that. Rachel muttered a quick goodbye, letting them know she would be heading off to start praying to Apollo. Hopefully the sun god would have more answers for them in the morning. Annabeth said good night to the others, pausing before heading towards cabin 3. Tonight she would be waiting for Percy to come back. If he wasn't back by the time the sun rose, that would be something she would deal with in the morning. For the moment, she pushed open the door to the Poseidon cabin, staring at the spot where the missing conch shell was supposed to be sitting on the shelf. Not bothering to change, Annabeth sat down on Percy's bed and opened her phone, staring at the message app she opened. Still nothing from Percy. She sighed, closing her eyes before mentally sending a quick prayer to both her mother and the Lord of the Seas. Bring him home to me, please, Annabeth thought, leaning back against the wall behind her. She also sent a message to her boyfriend, asking him for an update on how things were going. It seemed a few minutes later her prayers were answered as her phone buzzed in her hand. Quickly bringing it up, and heart beating faster at the sight of Percy's contact lighting up her screen, she read the message at the speed of light, sighing in relief at the contents. Hey, just got to Atlantis. Can't talk. Dad and I are heading out to check on Xanth and Chemipolia. Her screen read. Annabeth frowned slightly after reading the message again. It was unlike Percy to use Chem's full name, especially when writing or typing. She wondered if it was because he had finally managed to get one of her siblings to help him fix the autocorrect on his sister's name. I love you. Be safe, she replied quickly, but received no response. She frowned at her phone again, settling back against the pillows, propped on the bed. Despite her best efforts to stay awake, it wasn't long before the daughter of Athena fell into a fitful sleep. And that is the end of chapter 10. God, I've been stuttering so much today. Ugh. Okay, let's see, what can I ramble about this time? Well, let's just talk about how ironic it is that this is what I decided to do on YouTube when two of my biggest problems when reading at all, but specifically reading aloud, is stuttering and the fact that I have a mild lisp. Like, I chose to do this. This is I love doing this. I would never like stop doing this, but because I love it. But like it's kind of ironic that this is what I chose to do when I stutter a lot. I've got a mild lisp. Oh, my throat hurts at the moment. Like, not the worst. It's just from yelling a lot. There was a tournament, another volleyball tournament yesterday that I had to go to because I needed help even though I wasn't playing in it. And then the day before that was a football game, and we got so many touchdowns on Wisconsin was starting to not sound like a song anymore. I swear to God. Yeah, because our fight song is the exact same sheet music as another fight song. So the name on the sheet music is on Wisconsin. That's not technically the name of the song, but that's what it's called on the sheet music. So that's what we call it. Um, and I played it so many times that it was starting to sound like not like a real song anymore. Um, yeah, my throat was not doing well after that because I've got a lot of high notes and I played that whole song. Let's see. Oh, I've got another 3-game weekend for volleyball. We got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Woo! Tuesday's gonna be fun though. We got a pumpkin carving contest on Tuesday during the game. It'll be fun. I've got my pumpkin. It's got a dragon and flames on it. It looks great. I really hope I win. Um, I really hope I win. Oh, let's see what else. Oh, I've got Mr. Sleeping Munchkin with me. He's not very loud, but he's here. I know you can't see him, but I'm petting him right now, and he is very soft, and he is very comfortable. I've been if I find any good finished, completed Demon Slayer fics, I might start reading those too. Because since the movie came out, I haven't seen it. I wish I could go see it, but I can't because I don't have the money for that shit. I have been waiting for it to come out on Netflix or something so I can actually watch it. But basically, I have been rereading my Infinity Cast. I've been rereading my mangas, and I've read about 2.5 books since yesterday. Starting on 16, and I'm in the middle of 19 right now. So basically, I'm rereading the Infinity Castle arc, preparing for it to actually be watchable for me. I've also been rewatching the anime. I'm on, episode 2 or 3 of the Mugen Train arc. So yeah. Alright. I hope you guys all enjoyed this. I hope you all have a good night or day wherever you are, and I will see you next week. Bye.